Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So you guys love learning about the Kodak Ektar h35, and from taking over 400 images on these cameras, I've learned some really nuanced and helpful tips to getting the most out of these cameras. And in this video, I of course will be sharing all of those things that I've learned with you. Because let's face it, there's clearly a demand for learning more about this camera, so I'll be covering the most frequently asked questions that I've been getting. So don't you worry, I'm here to rescue you. In the first half of this video, I'm going to be answering all of those questions. So it seems that a lot of you are having a hard time conceptually understanding what this camera is, what half frame means, what makes this camera so special, and how this thing even works. On top of that, there's questions like, where do I go to get this developed and scanned? And what is the final image going to look like when I finally get it back? Strap in, let's answer all these questions. So the important thing to understand about how film cameras are different than digital cameras is the camera itself is basically just a dark box. And the film that you're loading, that is what's actually capturing the photo. Cameras are basically just dark boxes that hold your film and have fast lids. And what I mean by that is when the lid is opened, that's when the film sees the outside world, takes the picture. So in all 35mm film cameras, this hole is where the light passes through onto the film. So when we introduce the concept of a half 35 or a half frame camera, it's exactly that. It's half of a 35, it's half of the frame. Since it's consuming less film per picture, you're able to double the amount of pictures that you can take in a single roll. It will be able to take two completely separate, unconnected pictures on the same amount of space that typically would have been one picture. So no, the two pictures don't need to be taken consecutively. They're not taken at the same time. They're completely different. You can take them days or weeks apart. So that's really cool. And surely there's no downsides, right? So you may be asking yourself, since you're cutting the picture in half, wouldn't that cut the resolution in half? And yes, it will cut the resolution in half, meaning it may not be as sharp, but I don't think that matters as much as we think it will. I have a full and complete, very detailed breakdown comparing this camera to a disposable camera. Definitely give that a watch. There's some very interesting insights there. And spoiler, even if it's cutting the resolution in half, I would still value having more pictures instead, but hey, that's just me. So what else is a potential downside about a half frame camera? I don't really consider this a downside. However, it is a quirky thing that you definitely need to get used to. If you're holding the camera normally like this right now would produce a vertical picture. This is how you would take a horizontal picture. This is the quirk with all half frame cameras, but I don't think it's a big deal. It's not a deal breaker. It's not that hard to get used to, and the trade-off is totally worth having double the amount of pictures. Most rolls of film can usually hold around 36 pictures. So if you put a 36 exposure roll into this camera, you're taking 72. Now, this is awesome because it basically means that all of the rolls of film that you buy are now technically half off. Which, if you need it, there's your justification for spending more money into this art form. Okay, so let's say you're done shooting. Now what? Above is a very detailed video on how to use the camera and unload it. Where do you go to get this developed and scanned? Stop going to Walmart. I mean, you do you, but it's not going to be a good process and it will not be consistent. Here's the problem. If you go to a place like Walmart or Walgreens, they don't actually develop and scan there, and they're just gonna send it off to some third-party place to have it developed and scanned. It could be a professional photo lab, whatever. Actually, that's the point. You don't know. And when they return those pictures, they're just gonna hand you a CD with your digital files. Who even has a CD reader anymore? Not me. So I do not recommend going to places like that. Even though it seems like it should be more convenient by doing that, it's actually way more inconvenient, and now you gotta figure out what you have to do with this stupid CD. It's just not a fun idea. So now you're asking, where do we go? My recommendations are to go to your local camera shop. It will be very clear and advertised well if they work with developing and scanning film. Now, this process will cost anywhere between $10 and $15, but of course, prices are gonna vary depending on where you are. And with an actual photo lab, they are going to care a lot more about the produced result, and they will typically email you JPEGs of your scanned photos. So for example, my local lab, which I used to use, I develop and scan at home now. They would develop it and scan it in like 1 to 2 days, and then would email me a Dropbox link or a Google Drive link with my scanned pictures. And that's how I get them on my phone, on my computer, etc., blah, blah, blah. Or if I want to edit it again, then I can. Now, if you don't have a local camera store, there are some online services that will allow you to mail your film to them. They will then email you your pictures. I don't have any personal experience with these services as they tend to cost a little bit more. And for me, I'm just too cheap for that. Only use Walmart as a last resort. You've been warned. Okay, so now you understand how the camera works, what it does, what to do with your film when you're done. Let's talk about these essential tips for making sure that you get the best possible image out of this camera. I get this question a ton. What film really pairs well with these cameras? Honestly, it kind of doesn't matter. My motivations are always what's gonna be the cheapest. Because here's the thing, these are just cheaply made little cameras. They're not meant for these pictures to be blown up on billboards. These are just cheap, accessible cameras for the average consumer who is probably not a professional photographer. These are just for fun, vibey memories with your friends. If that's the deepest you dive into film photography, I'm still here for it. I do not want film to die away, and it is my favorite art form, so if anyone gets involved with film, I consider that a win. So the film I recommend is whatever's gonna be cheap. However, film generally does better with a little bit of overexposure. So I frequently shoot on ISOs between 200 and 400. And I guarantee all of your pictures are probably gonna come out darker than you think. And some film stocks that I can find consistently cheaper than the other ones are things like Fujifilm 200 and 400, Kodak Gold, or Kodak Color Plus. Again, there's nothing really fantastic or magical about them. It's truly just because they're cheaper. So yeah, please stop putting overpriced Portra 400 into these things. It's just for fun, vibey memories. Any film is gonna look great, so you might as well just pick the one that's gonna stretch out your dollar. When you're buying your film, there's gonna be some options on what type of film, but also how many shots are in that type of film. The most common are a 24 exposure roll, or there are 36 exposure rolls. And this is actually a really fun advantage to have with half-frame cameras. If you wanted to really maximize how many pictures you could take, you could load in those 36 exposure rolls, which would yield 72 pictures. But if you want it to be in your benefit, you could actually do the opposite intentionally. See, some people only shoot every time that they go hang out with friends. So once a year. Or when they go travel, you get what I'm saying. Some people won't fly through pictures very much compared to others. So let's say you want to finish the roll sooner, you could technically load in a 24 exposure roll just to get it developed faster, but the freedom is really up to you. That's also another big reason that I prefer these over disposables. You get to pick which type of film is loaded. You could try experimental or fun, quirky colors, or you could do the opposite and shoot black and white in this thing. The freedom is up to you. That's why these are so fun. There really aren't that many downsides to using these. And the next tip, how to avoid blurry photos. So when we talk about blurry, we need to make sure we're talking about the same thing. A blurry photo can be because it's out of focus, or a blurry photo can be because the camera was shaking. So let's talk about the first. These cameras have a minimum focusing distance of 1 meter, meaning anything closer than 1 meter is going to be out of focus. These shoot at a very slow aperture, meaning its goal is to get as much in focus as possible. So as long as you're not closer than 1 meter, you should be fine. So then you may be asking, okay, well, what about selfies? Give this camera to whoever has the longest arms. Otherwise, you're not gonna be in focus, but hey, at least they are. Okay, so let's talk about the other potential for blur. This camera has a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second. You may be thinking, wow, that's really fast. But it's racing the speed of light. So no, it's not very fast. And what that means is that if the camera is shaky, it's gonna capture that shake too. And that is also how you can get blurry pictures. Like this or this. So how do you combat that? The goal with these is to be as steady and still as possible. And how you can do that is by increasing the points of contact. So what I like to do when shooting with point and shoots is I like to press it up to my face so that my face is basically a very large stabilizer and my finger will then be the only thing that's moving. Don't take pictures like this, firm, steady. And when you push the shutter, you don't want to jolt it. I mean, just use common sense and be careful. And if you truly are worried about the picture being shaky, just take 2 pictures. Again, this is a half frame camera. In any other camera, you would have been wasting that same amount of film. So if you care a lot about it, just take another one. I do that all the time and I never regret it. So the next tip is, how do we avoid dark underexposed pictures where it's just so dark you can't even see anything and the picture is just trashed? I recommend using the flash every single time unless you're in direct sunlight. Even if you're under a shady tree outside, still use the flash. There will be 0 times that the flash will ruin a shot instead of make it better, simply because this camera really struggles with getting enough light. So yeah, use the flash. Use it 10 times more than you think you need to. If you're indoors, you 1000% need to use the flash or else nothing's gonna come out. Now, with the flash, there is a recommended distance between the camera where you're gonna get the effect of using the flash. I'd say anywhere between 1 and 3 meters is probably safe. However, obviously the further away you are from your subject, the light just isn't gonna reach that far. That said, you may wanna be careful if you're doing big group pictures because the flash might not reach them from that far away. So just some things to keep in mind. Now, another tip, if you are shooting close-ups, which I don't recommend, one important thing to know about the viewfinder is the viewfinder doesn't actually do anything. This is basically just a hole and doesn't accurately show you where the picture is actually going to be taken. So there's about an inch of a difference here. And the closer you are to a subject, the more of an impact that difference is going to make. Here's a great example. We were trying to use some flowers as some pretty foreground in front of the camera. We were holding some flowers in front of the camera like this. And of course, what we saw through the viewfinder is not what the camera took a picture of because they're just that much apart. And yeah, this is what happened instead. And another tip with this model, this features a star filter, which can be activated by turning that. It's a fun addition. I don't like it, it's not for me. So I actually just use it to protect the lens when I'm throwing this thing in my pocket. So yeah, this filter, which has a purpose, I just use as a lens cover. So take that. My last and final tip with these cameras, don't baby it. If being afraid of ruining these cameras prevents you from taking it with you, then it's not doing its job as a camera. It's an everyday camera that can take a beating. I've literally dropped these things on concrete. I've literally broken pieces of it. It's just plastic. You can buy another one. They are so light and non-disruptive to daily life that they're worth carrying around all the time. Well, hopefully you learned something new. If you want to purchase these cameras, I left some Amazon affiliate links in the description below. I am making these videos for free after all. So if you want to support me and give a little thanks, thank you. That's it for this video. Do not forget to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much for watching.